right, guys, welcome back to the Command Your Brand show. I'm super excited about this one. My name is Josh. If you guys don't remember me, maybe you do. I'm the host of the Command Your Brand show, and I'm brand ambassador of Command Your Brands. So in this episode, we actually have a very special guest speaker who I would love to chat with her about, and she's going to give it a little insight about this. She is we call her doctor because she's a very good expert about this, but she's a digital psychology expert, and she's going to go over a little bit about our generation and also about AI is another good thing. And she's actually a Global Hub Award winner. She's a best-selling author, and she's a very well-known public speaker. So I'd like to introduce you guys to Dr. Mary. Thanks for having me for the show.
Josh, it's a great pleasure, and I'm really glad to be here. I like the show very much. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, of course. It's a good opportunity, right?
Sure, it absolutely is.
Awesome. So I guess the first question for our audience here, I guess a lot of us are, CEOs and founders and, want to get more information and kind of want to learn a bit about you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you got into the space of, digital psychology and all that stuff.
Well, like all entrepreneurs, it was totally by accident. For me, I ended up going back to school to get my doctorate to begin to understand how leaders think so that I could pitch leaders. And from then, I began to look at how to systematize behavior modification for leaders and how to train leaders. And I had the great good fortune of working with Walmart and Walmart in Arkansas. And as a vendor to Walmart, they really took me under their wing and taught me about scale, profitability, and customer service, and all the things that you need to understand as a business leader. But here's the interesting part. I'm halfway through this, and I'm loving every second of what I'm doing. I've created a lovely training system that could expand to over 1 million people. They said to me, "Hey, Mare, do you have any idea?" Well, actually, they were very respectful. And they said, "Hey, Dr. Mary, do you have any idea of how generations and why they're responding differently to leadership?" And this was in 2013. And I said, "I actually don't." So I went through all the literature. That's what you do when you're a recovering professor. And that's how I started looking at how our brains are very different based on our generation when we're on technology and where are the differences. And that's how I got into doing what I'm doing now, which is digital wellness.
Interesting. So I guess for people who are listening, I know for some of us, maybe sometimes myself, sometimes other people, where a lot of people are sucked on their phones and they're all kind of all over the place with that, with social media, and people really hone down oh, you must go to social media because this is where is the best place where you're going to buy something, or there's I always feel like there's some importance to it, but there's a very high consumption where it almost feels like it's unhealthy. You know what I mean?
It is unhealthy.
Yeah. Why do you suppose that it is? Why do you suppose it's unhealthy?
Well, your brain's not processing the information properly. We need to just take a step back and think about the introduction of all of this started in 2007 with the smartphone.
Right.
And our brains have been around for 150,000 years. We focus language on auditory and visual, so pictures and then speaking. And technology, first of all, what we're doing reverses technology. You're seeing me in reverse. And second of all, our brains aren't processing the information. I can give you a little test if you want to.
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Let's look at it from a neurological perspective then.
Yeah.
So, Josh, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Great. How's your day?
Good.
Awesome. So I asked that question to 34,000 people. And then I sent them an email that said, "How are you?" And this was in communications, technology, and consulting. So we talked about the big GDP drivers. And you know what happened? We were all ignored. Everybody was like, "Mare, we have, 140 emails a day. Of those, 40% have to be answered the rest of the time immediately. Of that, I'm in 8 hours of meetings a day. I don't have time to tell you how I am, and I don't want to." And you start to get really, really stressed. And then I send you an email that said, "How's your day?" Now, your mammalian brain isn't recognizing these patterns. If you understand how things go through the brain, your mammalian brain is connected to your reptilian brain, and you start to go into fight or flight. And you're like, oh my God, what do you mean? How's your day? In government, people were like, well, how's my day? Am I getting a new manager? In technology, oh my God, are there layoffs? Am I getting fired? Same thing in consulting. What's interesting, Josh, is those are the same 6 words. And they cause 2 different reactions in person and on digital. And that's where our whole problem starts. Your brain doesn't recognize digital patterns.
Interesting. So do you think is it more of a problem to actually do it via digital than in person?
Oh yeah, for sure. But there's nothing's going to change digital. Our brains are going to have to adapt, and they will. They're doing a great job. But we need to train our brains just like we train for a run or just like we train in a gym. We have to show our brains where we want it to go. We have to be able to let our mammalian brain identify patterns easily and quickly. And we also have to give ourselves a break. We do that through gamification and micro breaks. And the science started back in the 80s, believe it or not. But Marshall McLuhan, who's a very famous academic, said that the medium is the message. And so what we are doing at the Digital Wellness Center is using the medium to create a message that allows your brain to take a pause and make better decisions.
Interesting. That's very cool. What you're kind of mentioning about that. I see how a lot of it can be used against you also. Like a lot of social media and a lot of things can be like just, you kind of feel like, oh my God, like, what do I do? And like it does release this, like the aspect of like, how can I actually do it? And like, how can I, like you're like a stress level goes up the roof. Cause it's like, it's a very interesting thing that just how social media and just how the digital world is
to do that. It's actually designed to increase your dopamine, so you'll stay on it. Yeah. News sites do it. Influencers do it. All these other people write so that you will stay engaged. In the old world, in the newspaper world, Hearst used to do it. And he used to say, if it bleeds, it leads. So bad news. And we're seeing the repercussions of that. In the United States, 80% of the population is more stressed than they've ever been before. There's a direct correlation or a direct relationship, I believe, it is my opinion, between that and the introduction of the smartphone and our constant use of social media and the smartphone. And that's why we're working with social media companies like TikTok to find solutions to reduce that increase in dopamine.
So what do you think is for people who are like, especially CEOs and founders, right? Who we utilize it so much, like, as an example, we utilize Facebook, we utilize, LinkedIn, we utilize a lot of different things, but like, how can we make it so it's not like, that's like what they crave it, they want it, but it's also like, how can we make it more of a tool rather than a kind of like a drug, if that makes sense?
I think what I've seen from a lot of really ethical CEOs is they're really beginning to understand how to get the message across quickly and simply and with less stress. So if we just look at how we just need to bring things down and simplify it, then we need to begin to understand how to target your audience and what are the generational patterns on digital that your audience recognizes. And that's what I would recommend CEOs to use.
Interesting. So do you think it's a generational thing that the younger generation are more into it than the older generation? Or do you think it's kind of, since we had the smartphone era and social media kind of grew with that, do you think it's just kind of go through it all together?
Well, I'm definitely part of the older generation, but each generation has their own stressors on digital, and we have to be very, very aware of those stressors. I think that what we're seeing with the youngest generation, Gen Z, they grew up in technology. Right. So their stress is technology.
Right.
And their stress is caused by technology. And what we're seeing is an increase in depression levels, an increase in anxiety levels, because your brain isn't able, like it doesn't matter how old you are, your brain still processes information the same way. Whether you're male, female, 5 or 105, your brain is still processing information in the same neurological pattern. What's different is the patterns the brain recognizes. So if you begin to learn those patterns and use those patterns in your marketing, in your emails, during online meetings, and then realize how you have to teach people new behaviors on how to step back. And that's another thing we do is, how do you take a break? It can be as little as, 60 seconds. Our research has proved in less than 3 minutes, 50% of people are less stressed when they do this.
Right. Do you think is it more of a I should quit social media type thing, or is it more the actual controlling part of it? Like, it's just the ability to control how much you watch?
Well, if we're talking about social media or technology, I think it's very hard for people to quit.
Yeah.
But I think what you have to do is teach yourself, just like you teach yourself proper nutrition, good workout skills. It's something, and this is where all people on technology have let us down. They haven't built in how to use the technology from a psychological perspective. They just want you to use it so they can sell you more stuff.
Right.
And now they're feeling the blowback of that.
Right. I don't know if you ever saw this before. There's a really great documentary I think it's called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've ever seen this. So it was interesting is that, this is around, I think it was around 2020, 2021 when I first saw it. And it was kind of interesting how the perspective they kind of put into it was the fact of, these companies are really utilizing your how much they're putting it more time and more effort into getting you to watch these and really listen to these things so that you buy their products, or that the more time you spend, the more they can analyze you in terms of all that stuff. You know what I mean? So, and I kind of wonder if that's what's happening with AI right now. It's kind of like, because now it's such a big thing now with between the tools that we use, the things that we have, it's sort of growing. I don't know if you probably experienced this where, like in our company, for example, we use generative, like we use the AI tools to kind of like write scripts or write whatever, so how do you think that's affecting today, like the generative AI stuff?
I think it's all fantastic.
Yeah.
I think if we start to stand in the way of innovation, then we're not doing our jobs as humans. Humans are constantly innovative. And what you were just talking about is the same problems we saw with any other innovation. For example, television is measured. And when we first started measuring, we'd know the income of the people, the house they lived in. Like,
Wow.
I remember reading that in school, and I remember thinking, oh, that's so invasive. We should never be doing that. And now we're just doing it willingly when we press on that little button that says, yeah, we can do this. What our job as humans is to begin to take back our humanity by understanding that they're following us. And understanding, okay, so I say, yes, you're following me. It's easy. I don't care. I do it with Apple all the time.
Right.
But then begin to understand who else has access to that information. And then begin to use that information for yourself.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting that you put it that way, was just the fact, it's how much information you're giving and how much you're actually using all this stuff. And it's kind of like, it's kind of almost kind of scary a little bit how much now they know so much about you, like where you live, how old you are, when your birthday is. Oh, and let's get your social security number while we're at it. Just like,
don't give your social security number, people. Just don't give any information. But you've got to put on a stop loss principle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, what is this worth my time? Is it worth my time to go and do this by hand? Right. Or is it easier for me to use Gen AI or, I don't know, like Google Scholar or something like that than walking to a library?
Yeah.
But, okay, so this is how much information I'm going to give out. And then you have to say this, but only this. Like, I'm going to stop here. So this and no more. And you can gamify it for yourself. You can begin to understand who's using what, how they're using what they're doing. Always remember, you like gaming, you like learning. That's what makes us different as humans. Right. And so when we look at everything they're collecting on us, yes, we definitely have to put a stop on it. Some of it is just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But also, we need to use it for ourselves. For example, we know when people are using us, we know when your highest stress periods are, and we show you. So, hey, if you're constantly stressed, and this is an actual case example, we were working with one team, and we wrote about this in an academic paper.
Yeah.
Is this team was super stressed and they couldn't figure out why. And then we pinpointed every Wednesday at 2:00, the stress just soared, and it stayed that way until Friday. And then they'd go home and come back on Monday. And what it turned out to be, Josh, once we showed the manager this data and the manager began to use this data correctly, was one bad manager that was abusive in a meeting.
Wow.
So that's how it affected the mood. And I spend a lot of my time, 96% of my time, in mood repair. And for the innovators out there, we actually patent it. And I really encourage people to begin to understand your audience, understand their pain points, and then patent your response to it if you can.
Right. So what do you think, just because, we deal with a lot of leaders here, like on Command Your Brand, we talk to a lot of people who are really involved a lot, So what do you say to like the leaders who are trying to be better with all this stuff? Like, what do you think the solution is to actually handle the social media type of behavioral aspects that come from it?
It happens. I wish I knew the actual solution. I'd be a multimillionaire by now. But again, I just going back to just creating guiding principles for yourself, but understanding the generational patterns that each of us are experiencing through technology, and start using those patterns so the message sent is the message received. For example, how many times do you spend in a loop of an email from hell, especially with reply all and all of those things? And then how many times do people come back to you and say, oh, I don't get it, I don't know? Or how many times do you read a post on LinkedIn and you get all hot and like, but that's not what the author meant at all.
Right.
And so how do we begin to understand, like, obviously you want the message sent to be the message received. Be quick, be efficient, be right.
Right.
It's going back to old principles. Like, the other thing I notice is that we don't have a digital body language. People don't understand digital body language.
Yeah.
So begin to learn digital body language. And I mean, I've written tons and tons about this. Happy to send it to you. It's part of it's in my book, Message Received.
Yeah.
The rest is in Digital Concussion. But that's the pain points for leaders, because we've got to talk about productivity. And then we've got to start talking about customer retention. I don't know if we're in a recession. I hear arguing points if we're in a recession, if we're not in a recession. As an entrepreneur, I'm in a recession if I don't have enough money in the end of the month to pay my bills. So what we want to start doing is looking at methodologies on technology that can limit your exposure to that bad situation.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. I think it's kind of funny. So I always notice this with, and what you mentioned about body language in technology type things, is it's such a interesting thing. And I think it's what you're talking about, the actual level and the stress level you get from emails. Like when someone says to you something in person is different than sometimes in an email. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's sort of like saying, like an example, this is probably from several years ago, where someone says, you wrote me an email saying, I need to talk to you. And it's like, you get this stress, like, oh my God, I think I'm about to be fired right now. Like, I think like I'm about to like literally lose my stuff here and just like lose my whole job. But then it's like, you actually come to face with the person. It's kind of like a different story. Like, oh yeah, I just want to talk to you about this idea that I had. I'm like, oh my God. Like it's like a stab that you just didn't want, but it was there, And I find it interesting what you mentioned, that it's even in text messaging too. Like when you text somebody something, you kind of get the same thing, And I find that so disruptive, and so, I wouldn't say it's evil, but sort of like it's disruptive to your flow of things.
Well, it's meant, like, I use that exact example in the book.
Yeah.
We have to talk.
Yeah.
Say that to anyone.
Yeah.
And they'll have that like, oh my God, response. It's and are we breaking up? Am I getting fired?
Yeah.
Is the company closing? All of those kinds of things. And Josh, you really hit on it. Like, be in text, in a DM, and any of those things.
Yeah. And I'm actually kind of curious what you think about this. What do you think people should do in terms of the digital what would you say, the digital way the flow they talk, or even just the digital mannerisms people have? What do you think people should do? Because obviously we do live in a digital world where we email, we text, calling is obviously a little different, but we message, we Instagram, we LinkedIn it, we do a lot of different things, right? What do you think would be the best thing someone can do instead of actually just doing like the messaging of, oh, we need to talk? What do you find is the best way to communicate in response to things?
So I did a study on this. It's in the book, but
wow.
Because I wanted to know, and that goes back to the question that Walmart asked me.
Yeah.
So for boomers, you just write it out in a long email. Force yourself to write a long email. Use Gen I if you have to.
Yeah.
But talk about the who, what, when, where, and why. Mm-hmm. And then you're so clear. Make sure the subject line is clear. It doesn't have an emoji. For Gen X, make sure you write that email, again, in an email, in point form. Here's the overall, here's a sentence that describes the overall problem. Here are the points I want to discuss. Here's the date I want to discuss it. When you're talking to millennials, put it in a text and just say, look, here's the problem. Here's what I need to discuss. Excited about your solutions. And I usually add an emoji, just because I genuinely like the people I work with. Yeah. So I always had a smiley face. Don't ever negate the power of a smiley face.
Yeah.
And then when we're working with Gen Z, it's just got to be a lot more clear and even more simplified, which is, hey, I have a problem. I need your help. This is what it is. Let's talk tomorrow at 9 a.m. Okay? Question mark. Again, smiley face.
Right. Do you think it's actually an issue for people around the world, who have businesses and, the leaders who are trying to email and try to get things done for their business? Do you find people have more trouble with it than they realize?
Yeah, they're lazy leaders. They're writing things in how they want to communicate versus how their staff need it communicated. There's an example in the book, high performing salesperson at a top 5 Fortune company. And she got a text, that was all caps from her boss that looked like her boss was yelling at her on a Friday. I need to talk to you Monday. Yeah. It was all like this. Make sure you get a time with me. And it was all in caps.
That's funny that you mentioned that. Yeah.
By the end of the weekend, not only had she applied for 100 other jobs, she's ready to be fired Monday morning. She has her resume all done up, her letter of resignation done up. It's over. She walks into the boss's office and he says, oh, great, let's have a quick status with everybody. They're on the call. He says, I'll call her Debbie. Debbie, actually, that's the name I used in the book. Debbie, I would like to celebrate your great success. You exceeded your quarterly expectations. This is awesome. Everybody give Debbie a round of applause. And Debbie's like, what?
Yeah.
So then, she says to him quietly when they're not online, I thought you were firing me. You sent me an all text. He goes, oh shit, sorry. I was late picking up the kids at daycare. And I did, I didn't realize it was in all caps. That could have been a really bad situation for that company. And leaders, it just takes 1 second. And I know we're all running late. And I know we have 1,000 things to do. And I have to do it myself constantly with a multi-generational team. But understand what the message you are sending means. Even if you have to make it brief, make it clear.
Wow.
Is that
yeah, that makes total sense. And it's like, if you just take the time to actually just put the email where it actually needs to be, where it's, people can understand the full picture of things. When you kind of give a one little liner, it's kind of like no one really gets it. And they kind of all freak out because it's like, oh my God, what do we do? You know what I mean? So I totally appreciate that. I always find that too with a lot of people that I speak to sometimes. We're all busy. We're writing these really quick emails, and sometimes the communication comes off a little it seems a little wrong, or it seems a little not the correct response that you want to get from a communication where it's not intentional, but it happens like that.
Exactly. And miscommunication has been happening throughout our entire world. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But why not limit it? Because what we have to look at is productivity numbers. Mm-hmm. You want your staff to be as productive as possible. Yeah. You want your staff to have as less emotional trauma as possible. Like
Right.
that was sheer trauma for that woman.
Right.
And so, and it could have been like you just talked about it. You thought you were getting fired by what can we do? So, how do we eliminate that? Because that negatively affects productivity. And if we go back to everything every leader is talking about, which is lower costs, increase the business. How do we do that? How do we increase productivity? And HR is always the biggest pain point. How much we're spending on people, so if you just think about how like I created even a manager's guide, and if anybody wants it, they can like reach out to me on LinkedIn. We've got a manager's training on all of this and about AI and how it works with generations. This is part of what we need to be thinking about. Like everybody's been thinking about AI and, oh, big scary AI. Forget it. AI's here. It's like the light. It's on.
Right.
But now what you have to do is look at how you make profit from AI and how you team profits from AI. That's the question for 2025.
Right.
It isn't, are we going to use AI? Well, dude, everybody's already using AI. So next.
Exactly. It's sort of like it's sort of here. You can't really avoid it because it's already part of every system. It's on our phones. It's in our computers, our TVs. It's like everywhere.
I know. I thought, wow, look at that new Apple phone that has AI built right into emailing.
Yes.
I'm like, do I ever have to answer another email? What?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I mean, for example, I have a Google phone, right? I'm not a big Google advocate, but like I like the phone so much of it that the AI tools on it are just so workable, and like it just does everything I need to do,
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Just a little bit about me, just because I know you don't know. I'm a very big technological person. So computers, phones. I'm also since 2021, I've been into digital minimalism. So it's like kind of like for me, it's like I actually have to really be careful with what I put on my phone, and whatever I don't use, I throw it away or put it away. So I've learned a lot from, I don't know if you know these guys. They call the minimalists. Like they're basically like there are two guys that kind of go over that, and I just kind of learn and followed that principle with them on that, So it's interesting because I find that technology is useful, but sometimes it can get so overwhelming that like you don't know what to do with a lot of it. And I think probably for you, you've researched a lot of different things about the psychology of digital aspects of life. And, some people just get sucked into it. And I think if I remember right, there was a study that was done about how people are spending like 7-8 hours a day on their phones, just like really just wrecking their whole day. And like they can't actually, and they don't even feel happier at the end. It's kind of like, okay, if I'm spending 8 hours, like why am I not spending that many hours,
What's interesting is, according to a study, it was in a book called The Man Who Forgot His Laptop. 90% of what we see on digital is negative as far as our brain is concerned.
Right.
So you're sending, and this is why I specialize in positive psychology.
Right.
Is your brain is tired. Your brain needs a little break. It's like you're running a marathon every single day and you're not taking any breaks. You're not taking any nutrition. And what's going to happen? You're going to burn out. And that's what's happening to all the leaders because they're not managing their digital in the same way they manage a race, the same way they manage working out, the same way they manage eating. You've got to start thinking about your digital mental health, and you've got to manage your digital mental health. And I talk about it proactively. That's where my business is. That's what I do. And I say that to people and they're like, what are you talking about digital mental health? And I'm like, because you're screwing yourself up. You're more tired. You're eating more crap. You're not working out. Use the phone for good, people. Use the phone for good.
Exactly. I think that's such a true point because we all, especially from us, a lot of us work from home or some of us work on different jobs. Even, I don't know if you notice, I'm from New York and I work in New York, right? I must have seen probably 2/3 people in a lot of these businesses now, they all have 2 phones or 3 phones because of their businesses or their personal life. And it's like, I can't even imagine what they go through with 2 phones, 2 social medias. And it's like a whole thing. And I'm like, man, that must suck.
I was with somebody. It was in a meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
Each one of the people around the table had 2 phones.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, you guys are going to pay a lot to your therapist.
Right. Amazing. It's
and imagine what they're doing to their kid.
Yeah.
See, this is the thing people don't realize is what you're teaching your children when you're on your phone all the time is that phone is more important than them.
Right. That's just wild to me. Like just how so much over time we've downgraded and gotten worse because of cell phones and other technology type things, like between like the streaming services and all these other things that are happening. And so now we're sort of sucked into a lot of this life things that we actually don't really need, but it's just there.
But we'll come out of it.
Yeah.
The same thing happened with TV. Remember, TV was going to, like, if you read the literature, TV was going to end the world in the 60s. Like, TV was going to be the end of the world, and we were all getting sucked in, and it was terrible, and blah, 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 blah. Well, we'll get through this innovation, and we'll learn to manage it.
Yeah.
But we're going through that really dark age of learning to manage it right now. And what I'm saying is enlightened leaders need to educate themselves because it makes you more money.
Right. Interesting. All right. Well, in terms of like, being a leader and like actually leading other people, even just people who are CEOs, what tips could you give that you think would help other people, like, myself or maybe some other people on digital like management or how to manage those things?
I like that question, Bob.
I know.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
I would say the first thing is begin to understand your digital mental health. And so if you've been on, say, for example, you're on social for your job or you're doing something for your job, count how you feel after 15 minutes, after half an hour, after 45 minutes, after an hour, and just create a scale out of 1 to 5. Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I content? Am I sad? Am I anxious? Am I depressed? And just mark it down for you. And begin to chart your mood so you begin to control how you feel on digital rather than digital controlling how you feel on it. That's the most important thing. And that's what I talk about when I say getting our humanity back. And then I would suggest, and I heard this, I think it was Laura Linney or believe it or not, an actress on a podcast. I was running and she said this and it was a Smartless podcast. I literally stopped because she said, listen to Bach for 10 minutes a day, classical music.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, whatever. She said, it'll make you a better thinker. I'll be darned if she's not right. I'm like, get rid of your devices, turn on music for 10 minutes a day and just sit there and listen to the intricacy of something else. And what you're doing to your brain is called transient hyperfrontality. You're clearing the prefrontal cortex by relaxing it. And last but not least, I would say take back your mental health. Spend some time talking to someone versus texting someone.
Right. Totally. I actually I like more calling people than I do on texting. I'm like, I hate texting. I'll tell you, for me, I'm one of those people that if you don't have autocorrect, then you're like a weirdo. And so I always make mistakes. And when I spelled, the F word, it comes out as duck. And it's like, and then all of a sudden it's like, you just mess up the whole conversation. Like, what, duck?
I love that. I can use duck from now on.
Yeah. So everyone, it's like the conversation just doesn't feel the same, and I find with a lot of people, especially those people who are very introverted and they're not good with communication over text as well. You need to have a live conversation. That's what is, I find the best thing about being human is that we can interact with each other, and that's like, it's such a gift to have because it's like when you talk to someone, you kind of feel you're giving them that awareness that they're there and they exist in the real world. You know what I mean?
And you're giving it to yourself too.
Right.
You're introducing serotonin in most cases into your brain, a happy feeling.
Right.
Versus that negative feeling when you text duck when you don't mean duck.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good. And then I guess I would love to talk about your book a little more because, you're a best-selling author and you talk about really amazing things. I guess, like, who is the book for, really? Who can people, who should buy the book or who should get your book?
Anybody who wants to be more productive on digital. It's called Message Receive. It's from McGraw-Hill. It was published in 2021, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I think it did well. And then we were kind of done with it. because COVID was over.
Right.
So nobody paid attention to it after that. But I highly recommend people start using it. And it's in bookstores and on Amazon and all of those kinds of things. And, where I'm really starting to look at in my future and in my business is how to make better decisions on digital. Right. So how does that affect managers? How is AI perceived by each generation? How do you manage stress on AI for each generation? That's where I'm starting to.
Nice. That's awesome. And I think it's so important too, because nowadays, I don't know if, you've had this, but like in my generation of people who are my age, they're like, oh, we don't care about college anymore. I mean, I never went to college, but it's I find there's a lot of skills out there that people want and people love. And I feel like just the people interaction with it is just so important, and actually you gain a lot of the information, a lot of the things that you can learn, even from college, which, people go to college for specific jobs, but in real life, that's such a unique value that I really like, is to talk to someone and you actually gain skills, just from talking to somebody. You know what I mean?
I think people are mistaken, and I'm a big proponent of more and more and more and more education.
Yeah.
So just so we're totally clear, that's my bias. But school isn't about getting a job. It's about socialization.
Mm.
And it's about understanding socialization and about understanding different people. You're in class to learn a different viewpoint, and we become too skewed on either end for us to really learn. And when you're not learning as a human, you tend to be anxious or depressed.
Right. Yeah, I think nowadays we've sort of lived in the age of let's be on our phone without hanging out with each other. Let's hang out via a FaceTime or a Google Meet or a Zoom call.
Yeah. So just think about certain actions that way, and then think about them in person and the joy you get more in person. And you'll begin to understand the value of in person, but you'll also begin to understand the value of digital and long distance.
Right. And I guess why, I want to go over this last topic here is, so for you in terms of generative AI, what do you think people should do in terms of as a business leader? Is it something they should be worried about? Is it something that people should really utilize? Or is it something that's just, maybe something that someone else should use?
Oh, embrace it.
Yeah.
It's like every other innovation, the phone, lights, TV, social media. You should be on top of it as a leader and understand how it applies to your business and how it can help your business make more money.
Right.
And one of the things I'm advocating for leaders to do sounds ridiculous, but have a play session with your senior leadership team and then your junior team and see how people play with Gen AI together. Like have a problem that has to be solved. Let them use Gen AI. They're in a meeting room, write it all down on a board, and then see how it transforms your business. Because what you're doing is you're all learning together, and the weak will teach the strong will teach the weak, and the weak will help the strong understand where the key learnings need to occur to help everybody begin to understand how to use this tool. Gen AI isn't going anywhere, and to embrace it is, in my opinion, key. I have a long way to go, but I want to learn how it's going to cause stress for people. I think there was a hockey player called Wayne Gretzky who said, shoot where the puck is going. See, I'm screwed up this whole analogy. Be where the puck is going rather than where the puck is. Something about a puck, and you've got to think about it in advance. Yeah. And so that's what we have to do with Gen AI. Like, we know where it is now, but where can it take us? Where can it take our teams? Where can it take our productivity? Where can it help us make money?
Right. I think that's what people want the most, is how can it help me, A, better my life or make it more convenient? And 2, how can it make me money?
Generally, it's fun. I mean, right now, it's not like it's in this huge advanced state.
Right.
But I sure as heck wouldn't get it implanted in my brain.
Sure.
But I think it's fun to play with.
Right. And it's a very good tool because I find it very helpful, especially for me. I do a lot of content creation type things. And especially, when you're, you don't want to spend, 2-3 hours on transcribing your entire podcast for 40 minutes, but like you have a whole AI that does it for you. you know?
My husband's a journalist, and he
Yeah.
uses it for the exact same thing.
Right.
For me, I love taking like an annotated bibliography of different stressors and say, okay, help me analyze this, and then putting in the patterns I'm looking for. Like, it used to take me days and days and days to do that. And now I can just, hey, this is pretty cool. Always double check for errors, though.
Right. Of course. It's never perfect.
No,
Awesome.
it is perfect. I'm definitely not perfect. Trust me. See, I didn't even get that sports analogy.
Yeah, it's all right. All right, cool. I really appreciate the time that you've given me and just giving me understanding, like, how the world is a little bit more, in their phones, and really like there's a part of us that we need to kind of clean up ourselves in terms of digital, wellness, and actually keeping things clean and very like safe for us, So I really appreciate the time, that you took to answer questions and just really going over together on like what this is all about, because I think people love more knowledge and understand about generative AI. I think is one big thing, but also, how can they be, more mindful about what they put and what they have on their phones, is like social media and other stuff. So I think I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I really appreciate, for you coming on the show. I guess my last thing I would love to ask for you, and I'm sure my audience would love to know, is where can people find you? Where can people kind of look and just, I want to find Dr. Mary. Where can we find her?
Well, I'm just plain old Mary Donohue on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And it's Mary, Mary, Donohue, Donohue. And mm-hmm. I'm located in Toronto.
Oh, excellent. That's awesome. Well, cool. I really appreciate the time you've given us. And I thank everyone for listening to this. And if you guys have not liked and subscribed to this, you definitely should. If you want more episodes like this, we could definitely reach out, and we could definitely hook you guys up with some podcasts. If you want to be on our podcast, you can also reach out to us. I really thank Dr. Mary for being on our show here today. And of course, enjoy the day, and of course, enjoy the show. And yeah, I'll definitely see you guys next time. Thanks, Doctor.
Josh.
Of course.